The Codex of Power is a new system that's joining us in Diablo 4. Essentially, this is a recipe book or a collection book of legendary aspects which you can unlock in the game either through progressing through the campaign or by doing dungeons. During both beta weekends, we could see 114 of these legendary aspects within the Codex of Power, but it is entirely possible that when the game launches in June, there might be more that was missing at this time. But essentially, the maths breaks down like this. You have 15, I call them common or shared aspects, which essentially any of the 5 classes can equip. And then you have 20 per class except for the Rogue, which only has 19 within the Codex of Power. Now specifically today, we are going to look at these 19 for the Rogue. And starting us right off is Aspect of Arrow Storms, which is based on the lucky hit mechanic. Now, something that I mentioned at the start of each one of these deep dive videos is that we have to bear in mind that the blue totals which you see on the legendary aspects are numbers which can change if you get better quality versions of these legendary aspects. The aspects which are in the Codex of Power are the base versions of this, so obviously a chase at the end of the game when you're trying to refine, or maybe not even at the end of the game as you are leveling up, when you're trying to refine your gear, will be to swap out some of these base aspects with better versions which you will find on legendaries in the game. But back to Aspect of Arrow Storms, this is based off of the lucky hit mechanic, meaning whichever skill you're using needs to actually proc a lucky hit, and then it says that your marksman skills have a 10% chance to create an arrow storm at the enemy's location, dealing a certain amount of physical damage over 3 seconds. You can have up to 5 active arrow storms. Now, I actually saw this in the second beta weekend. I think I was lucky enough to find this on an item, and I tested it out, and I was actually able to get this to proc quite a lot, depending on, of course, which marksman skill you use that has the highest lucky hit coefficient or chance, if I can put it that way. And this was kind of like, okay, the area that this arrow storm covers is relatively nice. And this was like a nice little add-on to, you know, more AoE damage on enemies as they, you know, were getting hit by your marksman skill. So I didn't mind it too much. Of course, when you play Rogue, you're either going to be focusing into a ranged Rogue, which is going to be on a bow or a crossbow or something like that. And then, of course, there's also the melee Rogue, which I think might end up being the more popular Rogue archetype just due to it being so ridiculously strong. But this is definitely one that you would probably include if you are playing the archer archetype, because generally speaking, when you're using the you know, archer skills, the issue that you have is a lot of the skills are very good at dealing single point damage but not so good at dealing AoE, and then again you have a lot of skills that are good at dealing AoE but kind of like their damage is middling to one specific target. So this is a good kind of like middle ground there where you get a little bit of both worlds. Then moving on to Aspect of Branching Volleys. This says that Barrage, which is also an arrow-based skill, arrows have a 15%, and of course this number can go up, chance to split into 2 arrows whenever they ricochet. So Barrage already has this effect that essentially when you shoot, the arrows ricochet between enemies in that area. So this then means that those can split. Now, whether those can also ricochet, I doubt that. I think that would be specified here, but again, I don't think that we're gonna see a lot of really great aspects in the Codex of Power for marksman based you know, rogues. So I think it's probably a case of like, you gotta take what you can get, and you know, this is one of those cases. Aspect of Corruption is next, and this says that your imbuement skill, now of course there's 3 different imbuements in the game. There's poison imbuement, there's frost or ice imbuement, and then of course there's shadow, and they kind of mean like one's a dot, the other one's a CC, and the other one's like an AoE. So this basically says that those skill effects have a 20% increased potency against vulnerable enemies. Now vulnerable itself as a status, you know, effect on enemies already means that they take more damage, so this essentially just makes that additional damage that vulnerable enemies take even more. I think mostly, especially on melee rogue side, you'll be working some form of imbuement in. I think shadow imbuement will be very popular, probably followed by frost or ice imbuement, which, you know, because of its inherent CC properties. But this would definitely be a fantastic include on the shadow side, because the shadow side, essentially those explosions from shadow imbuement, they can also be made to cause vulnerable, which means that follow-up explosions will then essentially benefit from this, and that's pretty damn dope. Aspect of Encircling Blades is next, and this is Flurry damages enemies in a circle around you and deals a percentage increased damage. So Flurry itself is already kind of like a skill that deals damage to a few enemies, essentially almost like in a cone in front of you. This just means that the Flurry effect is essentially like a mini AoE around you. And again, if you are going to be using Flurry, personally I don't find Flurry all that fantastic. Maybe I just haven't played with it enough, but this is certainly something that you can get like some additional damage out of Flurry, and it's going to be good for clearing out trash fast, which is really what it's about. Flurry isn't necessarily a skill that's going to be where a lot of your boss or elite pack damage comes from. That's where we get more important skills like Twisting Blade or Shadow Step or something like that. But this can certainly augment Flurry in a way, and that's pretty cool. Aspect of Explosive Verve is next. That's a hell of a mouthful right there. Your grenade skills count as trap skills. Now this is important because, for instance, you can get other aspects, you can get other legendaries, you probably can get unique effects on weapons which essentially proc off of traps. So when you use a trap, then X thing happens. So this basically just says that your grenades now also count as traps, so any inherent benefits that you have to traps will now also apply to grenades. Now this says whenever you arm a trap or drop grenades, you gain a percentage increased movement speed for a certain amount of time. Now at this point in time, I just want to mention the fact that one of the most attractive things about the rogue, at least for me, and I think it'll probably be the case for a lot of players, is the speed at which the rogue can move through fights, move through encounters, move through open areas, and just in general, oftentimes efficiency of a build, one of the big key factors of that is the speed with which it can cover distances, whether it's fighting enemies or not, but also the speed at which it can conclude fights. So anything that's going to boost your movement speed like this is probably going to be popular. Now this particular one, due to the interaction with grenades and traps and stuff like that, I don't know. It's not something that I experimented with a lot, but this kind of effect is something that we're going to see on other aspects as well. And it's again just feeding into the archetype of rogue being this swift assassin, essentially moving in between fights. Then we have aspect of Siphoned Victuals. This works off of lucky hit, so you have to get a skill that with the lucky hit to proc, and then it says that damaging a vulnerable enemy with a core skill has up to 10% chance to drop a healing potion. Now a lot of if you're playing a melee rogue, then you're going to be up close and personal to the enemies, and unlike the other two, let's say, primary melee characters that we have in the Druid and the Barbarian, both of those, Druid and Barbarian, have really good defenses and really good defensive abilities that they can employ to deal with the incoming damage that you get from being so close to so much enemies and so many enemies and so much damage at once. And this is something that the rogue doesn't necessarily have. So in the rogue, really, you have two options here. You either have to make yourself essentially not take any damage by being invisible up until the point where you strike, or having like some kind of mitigation built into your armor or something like that, or you need to just kill shit fast enough that they can't damage you. That's kind of like the two schools of thought there, at least in my head. So this, I think, plays to the fact that because you are so up close and personal and everything, and because, let's say, for example, you are using shadow imbuement, so now everything that you're fighting, stuff that it gets exploded by the shadow, that shit's vulnerable. And so then when you damage them with core skills, then there's a chance for you to drop healing potions, and you can of course then pick those healing potions up and keep yourself topped off in terms of life. This is not the favorite thing for me because, again, there's still so many things that have to happen here. You have to get a lucky hit. Then the enemy that you're hitting has to be vulnerable. Then there's a percentage chance, and of course, this percentage can go up, but cool. And then a health potion drops, which you still have to pick up and then use. So that's a whole bunch of shit that has to happen before you get the life that you're trying to get out of this. So kind of like really making you work for it with regards to this, and it's for that reason that I don't necessarily find this all that great at all, to be honest. I mean, a lot of these things, and I want to be clear, a lot of this stuff is things that I either tested in the beta in the limited time that we could, and in the limited scope that we could of level 1 to 25, which, let's be honest, is minuscule. But it's also a case of like, you need to really see this in the wilds and in the full release. So I will attach this caveat that a lot of the comments that I make here, and this is true for each one of these videos, by the way, I'm going off on a tangent here now, but is based off of that theory crafting. And it's entirely possible that once we test the things in, you know, a different setup or something like that, maybe it's like super sexy, and of course I'll be the first one to bring that sort of news to the channel as well. But you know, for now, aspect of the Siphoned Victuals is kind of fucking, you know, mid as hell. Then we have aspect of Uncanny Trait. Now this is dealing direct damage to a dazed enemy. Now dazed as a CC or status element is something that a lot of the skills of the rogue can apply, so it's kind of like a favorite CC of the rogue. So it says that when you deal direct damage to a dazed enemy with an agility skill, it grants stealth for 4 seconds. Now breaking stealth with an attack grants you 15% controlled impaired duration reduction for 4 seconds. So controlled impaired duration reduction is a way for you to avoid, or rather to not avoid, but to come out of being CC'd yourself. So this, first of all, unless we are going to be fighting a lot of like enemies, by the way I mean monster enemies, that are CCing the ever-loving shit out of you, so maybe you're fighting stuff that's freezing you the whole time or stunning you or something like that, yeah, maybe then this is useful. Or maybe a boss that has the, you know, has those effects constantly firing off. But this kind of seems to me like this might be flavored a little bit more towards like PvP, towards other players, where I think unless we go into like a PvP meta where it's literally like everything's getting one tap the whole time and it doesn't matter what fucking aspects you have on you, because whoever fires off their skill first wins the fight. In those cases, forget everything that I'm saying right now. But if we are going into a PvP meta where it's about trying to CC the other players so that you can get, you know, the drop on them and kill them, then this can be a good way for you to essentially defend yourself against that. Plus, I also like the whole idea of like something's dazed, so now you hit it, then you go into stealth, and at this point in time you have options. Like if it's a fight that you're gonna lose, you're like, okay, cool, I got 4 seconds to clear the fuck out. If it's a fight that you potentially want to try and win, now you can re-engage, knowing that if that class then tries to, you know, CC you, you're gonna have an easier way or a faster way of getting out of it. So I like the ebb and flow of the idea of this skill, but like I said, it really does seem like it might have like a very, very big PvP flavor sitting behind it. Next up, we got aspect of unstable imbuements. I gotta say, this is probably one of my favorite ones for the rogue. This is basically says that when casting an imbuement skill, you trigger an imbued explosion around yourself, applying the imbuement effects and dealing a number of damage of the same type. So how imbuements work is essentially you activate them and then they prime your next 2 attacks to deal that element. So you prime shadow imbuement, then your next 2 attacks apply that shadow debuff, and then when the enemy dies it explodes. What this does is it fires off an additional one right at the beginning when you prime it. So instead of getting 2 ticks out of this skill, you're essentially getting 3, with the added benefit of that you are able to literally be in amidst enemies, activated, that pulses out. And I'm just using shadow as an example here, but the same is true for poison and for, you know, ice and frost, that you then pulse that out, and now your next 2 attacks, you know, essentially already benefit from the fact that they already have that shadow imbuement on them, so they're already vulnerable and all of that. So I really, really like this. This is phenomenal, and this fits directly into the build that I have in mind for the rogue. Then we have aspect of Volatile Shadows, which says that when a dark shroud shadow would be removed, you trigger an explosion around yourself that deals 45 shadow damage. So firstly, for those that don't know what Dark Shroud is, that is actually a skill. It's a subterfuge skill for the rogue, and basically what it does is you can surround yourself with it. Think of it as shadow clones of yourself. I believe the maximum number is 5, and each one of these clones gives you 8% damage reduction, right? So at the time when you activate the skill and you get your 5, that is basically giving you 40% damage reduction right there, okay? And then as soon as you start taking damage from enemies, for every hit that you take, you, instead of taking that damage, I believe the damage is reduced and then 1 shadow is consumed. So think about it that when you activate Dark Shroud, you get like a 5-hit shield that's efficiency decreases with each hit that you take. Now this is a nice add-on to that, because this means as stuff is hitting you and taking your Dark Shrouds away, then basically they explode and they deal some damage. So if you are using Dark Shroud in your build, this is pretty sweet because it lets you weaponize this defensive effect as well. Bladedances aspect is here as well. This might be my second favorite, possibly also my favorite. It's difficult. There are so many good ones for the rogue, but this one says that twisting blades orbit for a short time after they return to you, dealing a percentage of twisting blades return damage per hit. Based on the distance the blades return, the orbit damage increases up to a percentage of the return damage. So just a quick run through here of how twisting blades works. Of course, base twisting blades without any modifications or anything like that, you essentially activate the skill. At this point in time, your character dumps 2 daggers into the enemy that you're targeting, and then I believe 1.5 seconds later, those daggers dislodge from the enemy and travel back to your character, and every enemy that they hit on the way takes a percentage damage, also based on the distance. So the twisting blades playstyle basically means that you engage a fight, maybe you shadow step onto something, you twisting blades, and at that point in time you either dash or shadow step away or something, but you create as much distance between yourself and your daggers as you can, while also keeping enemies in a direct line between you and the daggers coming back. And then when they come back, they're going to deal a bunch of damage. But in the case of this aspect, what's then going to happen is, instead of just going into your character and then the skill is done, they actually go around you like a little AoE, and this deals even more damage. Twisting blades is a good skill, but this shit makes twisting blades fucking goated. It makes twisting blades one of the best skills for the rogue, and it is phenomenal. Blast Trappers aspect is what's next, and this again works off the lucky hit mechanic. And this says that dealing direct damage to enemies affected by your trap skills has up to a percentage chance to make them vulnerable for 3 seconds. Again, I have a sort of a general problem with these skills that stack so many like percentage what ifs onto an effect. So this again means that you need to be getting a lucky hit, where let's say for instance you're using a skill that has a lucky hit chance of 10%, then that actually procs fairly low. So you need to be using something that gets a lucky hit. And then remember, now at this point in time, you need to be dealing direct damage to an enemy that has now stepped on one of your traps and is currently being affected by a trap. So it's got the poison on him, or it's frozen or something like that. And then there's a percentage chance, yes, this percentage can go up, to make them vulnerable. So this doesn't even deal more damage, anything like that. It's just another way for you to get the vulnerable status onto an enemy. And I think that the rogue has some really good options for doing that without having to do nearly this much work. So this could be a more kind of skill where it's just like another way for you to put more on. But I definitely feel like the rogue might be the class out of the 5 that it makes the most sense which skills you have on your bar, because you literally have so many really good ones. They're all fantastically powerful that every space, every slot counts. It matters. So you can't put something on there that, let's say, offers like 30% utility to your build or something like that, because there are better options out there just to make it better. Cheats aspect is next, and this says that you take a percentage less damage from crowd controlled enemies. Whenever a crowd controlled enemy deals direct damage to you, you gain movement speed again for 2 seconds. So crowd controlled, I mean basically, if stuff's dazed, stunned, anything like that, if you're freezing them, anything like that, those are all examples of CC. This then means that those enemies deal less damage to you, so you're debuffing them as well and lessening their damage, plus at the same time you're giving yourself some speed. So again, I gotta say the same thing that I said before. This is obviously good, giving you some serious mobility in terms of like moving against monsters and stuff like that. But again, this kind of seems like this would be pretty dope in a PvP setup. Energizing aspect says that damaging an elite enemy with a basic skill generates 5 energy. Now here's the thing, I believe that when we get to mid, or possibly rather to late game or late game rogue, it's gonna get to the point where you will be able to have a build that is optimized in such a way that you don't need to use basic skills to generate energy. Energy is of course the primary resource for the rogue, but there are so many ways for the rogue to essentially create this energy in a different way to the, let's call it the standard way that all the other classes use, where it's you use your basic skill to fill up your mana pool, your energy pool or something like that, and then you dump core skills or other stuff on there. So I think that this is cool, and this is probably going to be one of those situations where this is going to be nice as you're just starting out and you're leveling up, because it's just a really good way to, you know, get yourself a bunch of energy back. So every time you fight a pack, you can just have a full energy bar the whole time, and you can just go ham with your skills. But eventually you're going to get to a point where you might remove every single basic skill that you were thinking of using off of your skill bar and only have you know, other skills on there, and in that case this is kind of dead. In Shrouding aspect, again interacts with Dark Shroud and says gain a free Dark Shroud shadow every 3 seconds when standing still. Each Dark Shroud shadow grants 2% increased damage reduction. Now there's something about this. I wanted to test this during the beta, but I completely forgot. But the thing is, so this says gain a free Dark Shroud shadow. Now to me this means that you would still need to be using the Dark Shroud skill. This cannot be used on a rogue that doesn't have Dark Shroud on the bar and is not using Dark Shroud. If I'm wrong with that, then that makes this skill a lot better than what I think it is. If it is the case that you don't need it on your bar, this is essentially like having a 7th skill, because this allows you the free usage of Dark Shroud, which is a damage reduction and essentially a blocking mechanic for damage on your character. And not only that, it actually increases the efficiency of the damage reduction, which I believe is 8% per Dark Shroud. So this makes it 10% per Dark Shroud, which is, you know, fucking sick. But if it is the case of you having to have Dark Shroud equipped as one of your skills, then I guess this is okay, because this basically refills your Dark Shrouds. You have to be standing still though, which is kind of like the last fucking thing you want to do as a rogue. But it does overall increase the efficiency of those Dark Shrouds as well. My only issue is I believe Dark Shroud caps out at a certain amount of the shadows. I believe it's 5. Maybe it's more. Maybe on different levels of the skill, it's possible that, let's say at level 1 of Dark Shroud it's 5. Let's say at level 5 of Dark Shroud it's 10, you know, something like that. I think this is just really good damage reduction right here. Again, like I said, with a very busy skill bar and with so many great options, is there not something better there that just, you know, flat out just reduces the damage you take? You know, I'm thinking aspect of the protector for every time you fight an elite or something like that. That this is just something that, you know, just takes too long to give you the effect that you want. But either way, we'll test it. Opportunist aspect is next, and this is when you break stealth with an attack, you drop a cluster of exploding stun grenades around your location that deal a percentage damage and stun enemies for 5 seconds. Now, if you are employing stealth a lot in your build, this is pretty damn sweet, because every time when you show up with the fucking thunder. So every time when you come out of, you know, like stealth, you're going to be dropping these stun grenades. They're going to stun enemies, which means they don't, you know, they can't immediately react back to you. I know 0.5 seconds is, you know, minuscule and is nothing, but it can, the fact that melee rogue can kill as fast that it does, 0.5 seconds can literally be the difference between something even knowing you were there and already being dead. Ravenous aspect says that killing a vulnerable enemy grants you 15% increased energy regeneration for 4 seconds. Now, this is what I'm fucking talking about. This is really good because, again, we'll go back to my example that I've been using the whole time. You're using Shadow Imbuement. Shadow Imbuement is causing stuff to be vulnerable. You kill those things, and then this just gives you energy regeneration flat out. You don't have to get a lucky hit. There's nothing like that. Just it's kill shit that's vulnerable, get more energy regeneration. I like this. It's simple, it's easy, and it fits into almost any build that, you know, uses a lot of energy, which is all of them. Then we have a Shadow Slicer aspect, which says that when you cast Dash, and Dash is the mobility skill of the Rogue, comparable to something like Leap on the Barbarian, a Shadow clone is spawned at your location that also casts Dash, dealing 25% of the base damage. Now, I did not get the opportunity to test this during the betas, and so I haven't seen this in effect to know that. So with the wording here, it seems that the Shadow clone that spawns at your location that also casts Dash, does it go in the same direction that you do, or is it, you know, does it go in the opposite direction of you? Does it run alongside you? Does it, you know, go like 90 degrees in the upper, like all of that? And is there a way to manipulate that you can essentially, you know, go together, or that you can run separately? Because that can also help you with situations where you're trying to escape damage, because now you're creating in a way two targets, and you know the enemy's attention might be divided a little bit. But this could be cute. I'll definitely, you know, check it out. Anything like that. Dash deserves to be on your bar as well, because again, if you're playing a high mobility rogue, then you know dash is, you know, first in line there. Trick shot aspect says that whenever penetrating shot damages an enemy, 2 additional arrows split off to either side. These side arrows deal a percentage of penetrating shots base damage, but they do not split. So penetrating shot, already the idea of it is you shoot it and it goes like, you know, like a railgun, like through a bunch of enemies. And what this does is when it hits an enemy, it creates like a T almost. Like now you have shots that split to the side. So one of the things about penetrating shot is I found it to be really, really good, but the issue with it was that if enemies were coming at you in a straight line, then you'd have to go penetrating shot, penetrating shot, penetrating shot, and you know, you just have to waste a lot of time, or you'd have to run around and position yourself in such a way that the enemies are standing nice in a fucking, you know, line, and you can create a shish kebab. Now this cuts out that sort of planning, and if you're the kind of guy that wants to use penetrating shot, this is pretty damn cool, because now you have a shot that is really good at dealing a lot of damage in a line, but also branches its damage off to the sides, and that's kind of sweet. Vengeful aspect says that, again, working off of a lucky hit, making an enemy vulnerable has a 30% chance to grant increased critical strike for 3 seconds up to 9. Okay, so it's capped out at 9, and this basically says that, again, stacked behind a lucky hit, so you're not always gonna, you know, benefit from this. Whenever you get a lucky hit and that lucky hit makes the enemy vulnerable, then you're gonna get the benefit of this effect. And again, for the same reasons that I was complaining about the other ones having way too much setup to get the effect, this doesn't seem that great to me. Also, I mean, it has a percentage chance to grant you the increased critical strike, so sometimes when you get bad rolls, you're just not gonna get it, and that's already pretty, you know, unfucking great when you're depending on lucky hits to get you the effect in the first place. And that right there is all 19 aspects for the rogue. God damn, we made it through that. Thank you for watching, especially if you made it this far. Now, the same thing that I did with the previous videos like this, I will pick the 3 ones which I really enjoy from the list. Now, that's not to say that these will be super powerful or broken as fuck. They just seem really, really good, and I will definitely be including them in my builds, and in no particular order. This is, and I'm sure you can guess, the 3 I'm going to pick, because I really raved them up already while we were going through them, is aspect of unstable imbuements in first year. The fact that you get this additional proc of the imbuement effect, and it just fits so well into the idea that I already have for a melee shadow rogue, is phenomenal, and I can't wait to use it. In second place, Ravenous aspect, just flat out fantastic way for you to just buff your energy regeneration. There's a couple of these effects that are boiled into the rogue that you can tap. This is a phenomenal one, just to ensure that when those other ones don't fire off, you get the additional energy regeneration here. I like it a lot. It's efficient as hell. And then last but certainly not least, Bladedances aspect, with the way that it augments your twisting blades, is phenomenal. It is one of the 2 key aspects for the build that I want to build, and I'm super thankful that this is something that, because it's in the Codex of Power, it means that you don't have to depend on an item to drop this for you. You can simply, as it says here, progress the campaign in Skarsglen, and you're gonna get access to this aspect. Now, yeah, you could get gear that drops the better versions of this, but at the very least you'll have the base available to you, and that's going to give you what you need to get your build off the ground. Let me know in the comments down below which one of you will be starting Rogue day 1 with the game when it launches in June. Which one of these aspects has got you all hot and bothered and that you'll be looking forward to using. And also let me know if you're not playing Rogue for day 1, if you're picking another class. I've made a video like this for each one of the classes. If I haven't covered your class yet, it means that it's following tomorrow. I think the only one that's left to do is the Sorcerer. So I've probably covered everything already except for the guys that are waiting for the Sorcerer. Before I let you go, one more thing I want to mention is I am doing a giveaway at the moment right now. There is a link in the description to a video. This is what the video looks like, and essentially what I'm doing is I'm giving away 3 copies of the base edition of Diablo 4 on the platform of your choice. All you have to do is just follow the instructions on the video. It's a short little Google form that you have to fill in. I wish each one of you luck in winning one of those 3 copies. I'll be doing a live draw on the 1st of June where we'll be picking those live on air, so keep an eye out and obviously join that stream. Otherwise, I'll also get hold of you through the detail that you've provided in your entry. Either which way, it's also just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.